Just say no.
Just say no. Now, why would you do that? That would be terrible. All right. Mark. We're still in Mark chapter 14, and the words of the day are some of my favorites because this is a word, ego, it's an I there, but egoemi. Egoemi, which means it's you look at the notes in here, they're probably even better than the ego. Ego is the first person pronoun, which is I, and emi is the first person singular present indicative, which is am, right? Like in English, I am. However, what's very important to note about these words, about ego emi, about this statement, this sentence, is this is not a normative sentence used in Greek or most other languages, ancient languages. I think I went through this before last week because it was pertinent to the point, but I'll do it again just a little bit. In our culture, in a Greek culture, there's about 20,000 people in most large Greek cities, and there's 20,000 people approximately in Jerusalem. We know that, except during the festivals. During the festivals, they said that it got as much as 1 million people in the city, but normally the city has about 20,000. So if an average city in ancient times, even Rome, 20,000 people or so, maybe a few more in Rome, that means that you can almost know 20,000 people. You might be able to know 20,000 people. I don't know, if your memory's good, like it was in the ancient period, then 20,000 people is not an undue number. And where did you live in the ancient world? Did you travel around a lot? No, you lived in the same place probably your entire life. So you knew all these people. You knew their families, their children, their life, their death, everything. So in the ancient world, in ancient times, I am is an imperative that is not used because it's unnecessary. If I know who you are, I don't have to ever say I am, right? As a matter of fact, in most languages, in English, we are familiar with saying I am, for example, when we introduce ourselves. But in French, you say je m'appelle, I'm called, right? My appellation is. Or in German, not ich bin, but ich heiße, right? My name is. And in English, we tend not to do that. Well, why do we not do that? In the modern era, there's a lot of people. In the modern era, there's a need for us, we feel a need in our culture and in these cultures to say, I am, because, well, everybody is, right? There is no, you're special just like everybody else, right?
And the proof is standing in front of you, though.
Just saying. So, in the ancient world, I am is just not used. As a matter of fact, in the Hebrew culture, what is I am?
Yahweh.
It's God. So do you think people went around saying, Yahweh, I am, right? Matter of fact, more to the point, the second commandment, according to Judaism, ancient Judaism, and Judaism at the time of Christ, according to the Pharisees, the Yahweh is not to be spoken. So that means, what is it to be spoken? I am. So the Jewish people never said I am. The Greek people seldom said I am. It's a direct imperative that is unnecessary to be said. So therefore, when you see it said, it's a big deal, don't you think? When we look at John sets off each of the sections of the Simeon, the signs, with an I am statement from Christ, from Jesus. There is only one time when ego eimi is used in Mark that I know of. And that is, we should see it today. This one is the other one, eulogetou, eulogeto, and I think, what's the form of the words? Legetos. Eulegetos. You is a preposition. Remember, it means good. But what do you think this is? Logos. Yeah, logos or Lego. Logos. Good logos. Good argument. Good reasoning. Let's see, what do they say, the specific? Okay. I think it's kind of interesting that the translation, according to Strong, is adorable. I mean, you can see how they kind of got that out of it, but really that's purely cultural, right? I mean, who but a Greek could call a good argument adorable, right?
Does that mean they appreciate the argument or that it was a strong, valid argument?
It means that is really good because, now that's an interesting question, because just the fact that I say that it's a Lego, my argument, which is 90% of what is presented, right? Because I say my argument is a Lego, it means what? It's a reasonable argument, right? It's a reasoned argument. That's why it's stated that way. So a good logos, that comes, let's see, look at more deeply, a good reasoning, good, they say bless.
It doesn't necessarily mean they're convinced. If they say it's a good argument.
A good may mean, instead of the context of being a good, every reasoning is good in the sense of the logos. In other words, the good here is not the argument, but rather it's good. Like, it's a logos about good. Does that make sense? It's not a good reasoning, but the implication here is that it's a reasoning about good. Now, this...
It's good news.
Or good news. Like euangelion, right? The good news from the gods.
Oh, okay.
But, see, I'm not willing to go quite that far, because I think that it's someplace in between those two. Do you see what I'm saying?
But not adorable. Maybe not.
Strong's wants to call it adorable, but I think they took it in the context, and that's probably not a good thing to do, right? The problem is, what happens when we take things too much in context?
It becomes interpretive sometimes.
Well, it becomes part of our cultural interpretation, right? And it's not our cultural interpretation, it's the Greeks, right? And even in that, it's the Hebraic interpretation of the Greek interpretation, per se, right? Which I think, this is why I don't like to even go down that route. Because what do the naysayers about this then say?
It can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, it can be whatever you want it to be, but it isn't. It's Greek, and it's good Greek. And I think Paul, and in this case, Mark, who we assume is the writer of that we historically know is the writer of Mark. Mark's intention was to write in good Greek. Now, I want to point something else, too. Remember I told you that one word that means get together? And he had made a lewd joke based on that word, calling the Sanhedrin. I want to point out to you that one of the reasons they give for Mark not being that great of Greek is because every now and then they find words like this in Mark. And they say, well, Mark obviously wasn't a very good scholar because he used a pejorative word for the Sanhedrin. Yeah, you get it already, right? That doesn't mean he's a poor writer. What does it mean?
He's making a statement about them and what they were teaching.
Yeah, we get it, right? But the problem is, think about this. Think about the way it is. Okay, the people that are trying to interpret your text, I don't want to make a pejorative about them, but can you imagine, okay, a straight-laced Lutheran, a straight-laced Anglican pastor studying the Greek, and they run across a very negative pejorative term that's being used by Mark. And what do they then say? No, that's nasty. You can't say that, right? About the Sanhedrin, about the elders, right? The presbyters. Just saying. And so culturally, a Greek, I think, reading this would go, aha, that's neat. He's making a negative statement about the people that have just captured it and are judging Jesus, right?
This is a family Bible. We don't want an adult version.
Exactly. See, I tried to give you guys the unexpurgated versions, right? I'm trying to tell you what it really says. And what it really says might not be very happy for some of the people that are trying to tell us what it says.
Yeah,
They want to
Sunday
protect
school
us.
will never be the same.
But in any case, I just think that's fun and funny. So let's see how this fits. Let's look at 56. Right now, it says, I'll just back you up, okay? Peter followed the same way after they took Jesus. They didn't arrest him. They couldn't arrest him, but they took him. He's not bound yet. They're just taking him to the high priest, says the chief priest, the whole Sanhedrin, according to Mark. And so the whole Sanhedrin, chief priests, the Pharisees, they were all there. And Peter is in the Aola, the open area, the open courtyard in front of the house. They say mansion is probably just a house. It doesn't make any more qualification than that. In 56, they're trying to find witnesses. Matthew 55 says, the chief priests and the holos, the whole Sanhedrin, were looking for matura, witnesses, against Jesus so they could put him to death, to Thanto. And they did not find any. Now, something I forgot to mention yesterday is, or last time, is that it's not evidence, it's witnesses. Why weren't they looking for evidence? There's a couple reasons why they don't look for evidence. And only witnesses are, okay, I've given you a hint already. Well, there is no evidence, but in the ancient world, the only way you could prosecute people was based on witnesses. They didn't have an idea. To them, to us, evidence is what? Paper, it can...
Emails.
What's that?
Emails.
Yeah, emails, a trail, right? Exactly. Your server, wipe your server, clean with a rag. To us, evidence is, maybe a material, a knife, right? A knife or a club or whatever, right? But that's not the way it works in the ancient world. As a matter of fact, in Hebrew culture, we know you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses, people who saw it or can testify to it, right? And they have to agree. And remember I told you, to 2 or 3, if you have 2 that agree, then you're probably okay. If you have 3 and they're not quite in agreement, that's when that's why there's that argument. We miss the point, right? In the Hebrew it says 2 or 3, and we say, well, make up your mind. They mean 2 or 3. If 2 agree perfectly, then
They don't need number 3.
they don't need number 3. But if they're not in total agreement, then you need the third one. So they're looking for witnesses. And it says in 56, many testified pseudo-maturo. They were untrue witnesses against him. Their statements did not agree. Now this is really important because remember I told you. Yes, sir.
And now I apologize, we missed a few sessions, so this question may have already been asked and answered. But did they have a stenographer? Where is this information coming from? Obviously Mark was not there in the Sanhedrin trial. Where did they get this information?
Well, Mark could have been there. It doesn't mention. We think that Mark, we talked about the young man that was wearing the sit-on. But what's very interesting is, and I mentioned this before, Peter, very specifically it says in 54, Peter followed, he went along in the same way, right, Tin Hodos way, at a distance right to the Elo, the open area in front of the house of the high priest. And there he, suga katema, he sat in company with not guards, but subordinates of the high priest, the Pharisees, and the Sanhedrin.
But he wasn't in the room when they were questioning Jesus.
He didn't have to because it's pretty much open.
Yeah, what is a room back
Yeah,
then?
what is room? And also, the other thing is, according to this, the whole of the Sanhedrin, there were 70 guys there. Of those 70 guys, 4 were Pharisees, grammateos. We know that from history. One of them, and I mentioned this last week, I think it's last week, one of them may have been Saul. Because Saul was one of the 4. There was the rabbi of rabbis, the Rabboni of Rabbones, Gamaliel, he was one of them. We don't know who the other 3 were. We just know there were 4 Pharisees that were recorded to be in the Sanhedrin during this time. We know that one of the 4 at one time was Saul. Saul could have been in the Sanhedrin. If he wasn't in the Sanhedrin, knowing Saul's personality, where would he be when Gamaliel, his rabbi, was there?
Standing right
Almost
beside him.
right in the crowd.
He would be right in the crowd. And by the way, where was Saul at this time? No matter what?
In Jerusalem.
He had to be in Jerusalem. So most likely Saul may have been there. It is possible that Mark might have been there, and Peter was definitely in the open area.
I feel bad because I can't remember where, but I thought that in one of the other Gospels it said that John was acquainted with someone in that group, and Peter kind of went with him, and he dropped Peter off outside, and he went in. So John would have been a really authoritative witness, and could have certainly relayed whatever went on to Mark, I would think.
Precisely. And remember, in English, we're English, we're English mindset. So we want to know all these details, but the Greek is about a logos to tell us, right? And the Greek doesn't care how you get to it. The Greek cares about that you do the logos to tell us, and that's it. So, yeah.
But to be a good argument, you would want it to be factual.
And, yeah,
And
no.
it could have been refuted.
But the other thing is, too, remember, let's say this is an open court, although it's probably smaller than this, but if it's an open court before the house, did the windows have glass in them?
No.
What did they have in them, if they had anything?
People sitting
Skin
there.
or something.
Yeah, people sitting in them, or sheepskin, maybe covering like that. The world is open. And they did have pivoting, like doors. They had pivoting doors, a lot of times wooden doors in a Greek house. But most of the time when the house was open,
They were open.
the doors were open. As we're going to see what happens later, but it's very interesting because the doors to the house get open when the gate doors get shut. And when the gates get open, the house doors get shut. But these are ancient world concepts, right? And by the way, how much air conditioning and heating do they have?
Fires.
Yeah, they just wore warmer clothing, when it got cold. And yeah, they had. Well, as a matter of fact, it says Peter was in front in the courtyard. The point I made last week was the fact that Peter could sit down with the subordinates. They weren't guards. It doesn't say guards. It says hupateros. They were subordinates to the high priest and Sanhedrin, which means they had to be lower priests and Levites. They had to be. So Peter looks like them. Peter's problem becomes later when he opens his mouth. Of course, that was Peter's problem all the time, right? So I think it's very interesting. Yes, John may have been there. Mark could have been there. Peter was definitely listening through the windows because that's what everybody's doing, right? They're all listening, and they're all probably making a lot of noise. And John could have been in there too, and Saul could have been there. And there could have been others.
By omission, not mentioned.
And by the way, remember the guy who asked for Jesus' body? Joseph of Arimathea was a member of the Sanhedrin.
Could have been more.
And there could have been more. Yeah. So the reports we get, this is the argument, this is a classic argument against the New Testament works. Because you get people saying, well, it doesn't say that. Well, yeah, but I don't know half this stuff why Caesar, in Caesar's stuff either. Where did he find out about it?
But those who were there did not refute it.
And they didn't refute it. But, even so, I don't know. It seems obvious to me. There's a lot that we want to know this, but we look at it culturally, and so we miss the cultural point. Like I said, these are open areas, open houses, especially open to a courtyard. And it's interesting that it does tell us it's a courtyard, because a courtyard means that it's open to the house, right? Especially in the ancient world. In any case, let's see. The other thing is, when they are looking for, they want to try him for death. So, in Jewish thought, can you just kill somebody? Can you kill somebody for stealing?
No.
Yeah. Can you kill them for rebellion? Not really. You can kill them for striking. If you strike somebody with the intent to harm, which means with a closed fist, or with, you can do them, you can do them backhanded, but striking in Jewish culture with an open hand is considered striking, or with a closed fist is considered striking. That's what the commandment about thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not strike, because striking with intent to kill is considered a death-dealing crime. You can be put to death for that. There's no adultery here, right? So adultery, you can't be put to death for stealing. It's just for adultery. You can be put to death for blasphemy or blaspheming the Sabbath, but you have to actually say something or do something, right? Anyway, so they're looking for a reason to put him to death, and so this is. And also, I thought this was really good. Ellen said last week that, and I agree with her, the chief priests and these guys did not expect Judas to bring Jesus to them then. They thought he would be a good little helper and bring him, during the day, after the festival, not close to Shabbat, not in the middle of, right? But old Judas was ready to go. He went and got Jesus and brought him right away. And so I think they were really surprised. When they heard Jesus was coming, that this was coming and happening, obviously they sent their servants, but I think they were really responding quickly to Judas's actions and didn't expect it to be.
Why, when they say he blasphemed, why didn't they stone him themselves?
Well,
They could have.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So, yeah, that's a good question. Keep that in mind. 57. Then some stood up and gave false testimony against him. So in other words, they couldn't find any witnesses who would agree, right, to anything that would be a death-dealing type sentence, Maybe they said, I didn't like the way he looked, right? Just saying. Anyway, nobody agreed, right? And no one gave any witness that would put him to death. So then some stood up and gave false testimony. 58. We heard him say, I will destroy this, and here's one, Cheripoitos, this man-made, literally made by human hands, temple. A temple made by human hands, nails. And in 3 days I will oikodomo, I will build a house, another not made, archepoteos, not made by human hands.
Nice try, but he never said it.
Well, I was going to say, at least somebody was listening to Jesus. The disciples got it wrong. The disciples could never figure it out, right? But somebody's listening. Can you see what Jesus is thinking right then? Yeah, somebody was listening to me, right? And even though they didn't get it quite right? But it's still,
It's true.
that's what Jesus pretty much said, right? No, you got to put him to death for that. Well, Shazam! Do it, right? Do it, and then, well, even if he did it, okay, if I said that to you and I did it, you'd go, ooh, you must be God, right? So, I don't know. I don't know. I'm thinking Jesus is really happy, and you can see, I'm sorry, my picture of Jesus, he's like, he's chuckling the whole time. And then 59, yet even then their testimony did not agree. They couldn't get 2 or 3 to get their story right. It's not a crime on the books. It's not a crime, right? And actually, Romans gave us law, and Romans have Roman law. You can't, thought crimes are becoming the new thing, right? Thought crimes always exist in totalitarian regimes, so, crimes because of what you're thinking. So Minority Report and what's the new crimes they have? Hate speech and hate thoughts, right? Your hate thoughts. That's just ludicrous. So you give somebody a worser sentence for killing someone because they had hateful thoughts? Like, are you idiots or what? Anyway, even the Hebrews at this time knew that you can't put people to death for thought, right? However, remember, this is early cultures. The Greeks totally rejected this idea. To the Greeks, the Greek hearers of this are laughing. Because this is a huge deal. People in the ancient world did believe that words had power, and therefore, to say something like this might be prosecutable, right? But the Romans and the Greeks both rejected that view. I mean, in Roman law and Greek law, you actually had to do something to be punished. And even Hebrew law is supposed to be that way. You can't be punished just for thinking or for saying. You have to be doing, right? However, remember, the first 5 commandments have everything to do about God, and if you interpret that in terms of thought rather than, it could be speech. Like, for example, don't say the name of God. The 2nd commandment, right? Don't use the name of God. That's what they thought in this time. So,
Our prayers are thought, word, and deed by what we've done, left undone.
yeah.
We moved away from that, haven't we?
Well, something, but the Greek worldview is our worldview, hopefully, today. It's becoming less and less, but that's okay. So, finally, nobody agreed. There's no crime in the books. They can't do anything. So, it's already, late, and they've been probably discussing this for a while. So, 60, it says, then the high priest, they got a bunch of chief priests, but the high priest stood up before them and asked, Epitaro lego. This is the thing that bothers me is they keep translating these as asked. In the King James it says, and then Jesus, I think it says, asked and said. And asked and said is probably a little better, but the said is the lego. So the high priest stood before them and asked lego. He made a lego in a question, an argument, and to Jesus. Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? Now this is a trick, right? What are they trying to get Jesus to do? Incriminate himself, exactly. So the high priest is obviously good with torture, and he knows how to do a good, dictatorial type thing. So if I get a witness to prosecute themselves by their words, then this is great. So he's pretty smart there. Literally, I mean, can you imagine a high priest? The high priest is not a dummy. He realizes, in fact, probably everybody there realizes this testimony is just silly. I mean, this is really getting silly, right? Because the only witness is Mark, and this is why Mark says it. Do you see why Mark would say this? What's he trying to do? Mark trying to do for his audience?
Show you the ridiculousness. Yeah, show that even their best argument was bad.
Exactly. Yeah, and the Greeks that are hearing this, right? Greeks and Romans, the Greek speakers that are hearing this, they're going, because it's silly. Yeah.
I think it's just to show that Jesus surrendered himself. He made the decision that he was going to give them the evidence against him.
Well,
if he wouldn't have said anything, they wouldn't have been able to come up with that evidence.
I'll give you a precursor. The precursor is this. It'll say to us when we get there that the chief priests, the high priest, and the Sanhedrin paradidomai Jesus to Pilate. They yielded him to Pilate. Remember, who yielded him to them? Judas yielded him, right? But it really wasn't Judas. And who yielded him to Judas? The disciples did. And who yielded him? Eventually it was Jesus that yielded himself up. Paradidomai. There's nobody arresting. There's nobody capturing. There's no one leading in chains yet. Right? It's paradidomai. He's being yielded up. So,
well, from the very beginning, he didn't have to go to Jerusalem. He knew that Judas was going to betray him. He knew who it was. He could have left at any point.
And his hope. Jesus' hope, even at this moment. I mean, Jesus is probably laughing at him, but his job is to what?
Teach the disciples.
To be crucified.
To be crucified and raised again, right? Because he said, the Son of Man, right? And he's already been pronounced the Son of Man, must be yielded up. Now, he has been yielded up. So the next step is he must die, and then he must rise again. Do you think the disciples are getting it? Maybe. I don't know, because he's been yielded up. So maybe they're thinking, I hope. The high priest stood up and said, are you going to answer? But Jesus remained silent, says, Siopeo, and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked. It says, Epiterateo lego. And look what he asks. Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One, the eulegatos? The eulegatos, the good logical argument. And by the way, this is really important, because the words that he used, remember I told you let's see if this works. Remember I told you there are the three, in the beginning, literally, in the beginning, in the Greek, Septuagint, you find, in the beginning was Theos, Ruach, Theos is not the word, it's Adonai. Adonai. This is not a good pen. There is Adonai, who is in Greek is Theos. There is Ruach, which in Greek is Pneuma. And there is Amar, which in Greek is Logos. That's why John wrote, in the beginning was the Logos, the logical argument. The Amar is the command speech of God.
So this is a statement back to Genesis.
This is not just a statement back to Genesis, but it is. It is calling God the Eulogos, which is really interesting because the Eulogos is whom? Jesus Christ. The Amar. This is Father, this is the Spirit, and Christ, the Amar, is the command speech of God, the Eulogos. That is the Eulogos that created everything, right? And that's what John writes about at the beginning. So, he asked, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One, the Eulogos, the good words? This is a statement that Jesus would be happy to answer. This is the statement. Remember back to Mark 8. And Jesus said, who do they say I am? Who do people say I am? Right? And he said, who do you say I am? You are the Christ. Now, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? Now, the answer to this question, remember, the whole question of Mark is, who is Jesus? That is the whole question. And so far, we have seen, or the answer has been, first, we learned that he was God, and then we learned that that's up to 8. He's got to be a God. He has to be God. There can be no other answer, and that's what Peter got wrong. So therefore, he's God, but Peter says, you are the Christus. The Christus. You are the anointed one, right? And of the anointed one, we have two anointeds. There is the Son of Man, and there is the Son of David, right? The two anointed. And Jesus was anointed, finally, by a woman. Now look what happens. This is really, really neat. 62. Ego imi. Ego imi. I am. What did God say to Moses? I am that I am. Actually, I am who I am. I am. Jesus just said he was God. All the above, yes. Because the question is, are you the Christus, the Son of the Eulegos, right? And he said, I am. He just said he is God, He just said he is the Christus. He said he is the Son of Man. And he just said he's the Son of David. Ego eimi. And you will see, and by the way, it's Jesus legoed. And you will see the Son of Man. So he just said, I am the Son of Man, right? Sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, the Dunamos. He did not call him the Eulegos, he called him the Dunamos. Why did he not call him the Eulegos? He is the Eulegos, that's right. Look, that crazy Rob Brown dude said that Jesus never said he was God. Like, what are you reading, dude? Why don't you read a little bit of Greek here? Because it is so obvious what Jesus is calling himself through the Greek. It's beautiful. And he says, at the right hand of the Dunamis, the Mighty One, the miraculous power, and coming on the clouds of heaven. By the way, this is the telos of Mark, right here. And guess who the telos of Mark, whose mouth did the telos of Mark come into? The high priest. The high priest announced the telos of Mark. Isn't this beautiful? I mean, we've been studying this from the very beginning, from 1. And I told you, from 1, this book, this work, asks the question, the Logos, who is Jesus? And right here, this literally is the telos of Mark. This tells the whole thing, the whole book. Everything wrapped up in this single statement here. And Jesus answered, I am, which you cannot miss this. I am means to the Hebrew people that he just called himself God, Yahweh. He just said he is Yahweh. Bingo.
Right there.
And this is what happens. Well, first of all, I'm going to do a quick one because there is a couple of allusions to the Old Testament. The allusions to the Old Testament, one of them is from Daniel chapter 7. And let's see, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, that's one. And I'm going to skip down here. It's a vision of him. And there were 12 other beasts that had been stripped of their authority, but they were allowed to live for a period of time. And in 13, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. 14, he was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. When Jesus said this, what do you think the high priest was thinking of right at that moment? Daniel 7. Yep, Daniel 7. There's no question of that. And then this also from Psalm 110, 1 through 7. I'll read the whole thing. But this, okay, we had this question. This is 1. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool at your feet. Guess what Jesus just gave them? Remember the question in the temple that Jesus asked them and they couldn't answer? His question was, how can David be this, how can the Christus, the Son of Man, be the son of David? Right? So look what he says. The Lord says, my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool at your feet. The Lord will extend your mighty scepter from Zion. You will rule the midst of your enemies. Your troops will be willing on your day of battle, arrayed in holy majesty. From the womb of the dawn you will receive the dew of your youth. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will crush kings on the day of his wrath. He will judge the nations, heaping up the dead and crushing the rulers of the whole earth. He will drink the blood from a brook beside the way. Therefore he will lift up his head. The answer to the question is, Jesus is whom? Son of David. In this simple verse, we get the answer to all those questions. He is God, he is Christus, he is the Son of Man, he is the Son of David. And remember I told you that Jesus, You want a straight answer? Okay, the high priest asked, "Are you the Christus, the son of the Eulegos?" And Jesus gave him more than an earful. And then the response is, as you have already guessed, 63. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He legoed. The reason he had that response is what?
From the first commandment.
Second commandment.
I'm sorry, second commandment.
But he did break the first. He just called himself Yahweh. And in Jewish thought, this was enough to get you croaked.
Religion,
Jewish thought.
separate from Roman.
This was good enough to get you croaked. So that's why he tore his thing. Because Jesus, and you know, his strategy worked great, right? The high priest. Of course, I don't think the high priest expected this. Because, look, these guys are really smart. You know, they are not clueless about this. They know this. They have memorized the Septuagint. They have memorized the Hebrew. They have memorized the Torah. To be one of these high priests, they did not memorize the Talmud, but they knew all the Tanakh. So the high priest, the priest would know all the Tanakh, right? They know all of the biblical documents of the Old Testament. They had it memorized, and they memorized Septuagint too. So the minute Jesus said this stuff, their minds go directly to, bang, those scriptures. He's quoting them to them by his mouth, right? And the minute he said, "I am," boy, that's it. That's the end. 64. You have heard the blasphema. Literally the hurtful words in Greek. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that, Jesus could only be convicted to death under Roman law.
Right.
And this declaration was not a crime under Roman law. Is that why Pilate said, "I find no fault with him"?
Yep.
So then it became a political decision after that.
Then it became a political decision.
And he washed his hands of it. He got rid of the blood feud.
And although in the other documents it's very clear that, and we'll see how Mark handles the crucifixion, but literally Pilate, we will see, will give Jesus over to the crowd, right? Even though, and Pilate oversees things, so he's a good Roman. Pilate wants everything done in good order. Yeah, and Pilate, if you read my book, Pilate did not want to condemn Jesus. I think that's quite obvious through everything. Pilate wanted to get this problem off his hands because it was a problem. And he did not want, look, he had 1 million people in Jerusalem at this time. Do you know what kind of problem that could cause for him and his legion? And not only that, he had already gotten, we have documentation, it's in the Archeo documents, so it's not good, it's not super reliable by historical measures. But we do have some documentation with Pilate writing, and we do know Pilate did write to the Senate before because of the people he killed, the Jews he killed in Maritama, in Caesarea Maritima. Caesarea Maritima is where he usually lived. And remember it talks about it in Luke, that Pilate watered the altars of the Jews with their blood. That's because historically we know from Josephus and from other sources that Pilate had, when the Jews rioted in Caesarea Maritima due to the imagios, the sigils for the legion, when Pilate was pretty smart, but he didn't understand the Jewish culture. So Pilate, one of the first acts he did, Pilate was actually a pretty good procurator, but one of his first acts was he wanted to protect or bring Jewish law, bring Roman law to the city of Jerusalem, which was a serious problem for him. So that's why in my book he brought 2 of the groups of the legions, oh man, I need to read my book. You have the centuries, and then you have the
Cohorts?
The cohorts. Yes, thank you. The cohorts. He brought 2 cohorts of 10 legions, 10 legions each, into Jerusalem and bunked them down, probably in the Anatolian fortress. So when he did that, the problem he caused was he brought the imagios. The imagios were the pictures, the portraits of the deified emperor. And so by bringing them in, it says, do not have any images, right, of a god. Graven images? To the Jews, this was not just a graven image. Any image of a person in this period of time was considered a sin. You couldn't get your portraits taken, right? And so just having a picture of the emperor, a portrait, was considered a grave sin. And so the Jews rioted in Caesarea Maritima. And basically Pilate's response was, he sent the legionnaires out to kill him. And he did, he killed him. And so that was just the beginning of his troubles, okay? Pilate slowly got smarter, and that's what I try to show in my book, how he got smarter about this, especially with Abinadab's help. But one of the things he did was he snuck the imagios back out of the city at night. By night, we know that from Josephus, so that they didn't know it. But then he said, I've moved the imagios out to the Sanhedrin, so that would stop the rioting. See? Because he wanted... Look, Pilate's job was to do what?
Keep order.
Give tax money back to Rome.
Get tribute for Rome, yes. Look,
At the least cost.
they don't care about the order. The only reason the IRS cares about you and about law is because they get your money. U.S. government doesn't care about you. They would just kill you, except they get lots of money from you, see? So, look, dictators and governments don't care about you except the money they can suck from your bones. That's why we have a constitution, or did have a constitution at one time. I'm just saying that governments, especially these type of governments, the Romans didn't care about anything except getting the money. And the best way to get money is you have order, you have law, you have people going about their business, right? Because then you can get more money from them.
Willingly giving that to you.
Reasonably willing giving it to them, because even Pilate didn't want to give the taxes. It's very obvious that Pilate was irritated by having to give tribute, because he saw the tribute as what? A destabilizer in Judea, right? So even he didn't want to do it, because he was trying to maintain an even strain. And he's only got, as far as we know, he had 1 or 2 legions. He probably had 1. The other legion was up in Syria, but he may have had 2. He may have had the Frentis and the other one, Frentis, and there's another legion number. Anyway, so Frenzies and the Frentis. He may have had those 2 legions. But 2 legions against millions of, irate people is not a lot, right? He's maintaining an even strain, and he's in a city right now with 1 million people. And guess who else is there? Herod is there. Just saying, there's lots of them. So anyway, 64. You've heard the blasphemy, the hurtful words. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy to death under Jewish law. And I had a note. Does this sound like a college campus or what, right? Wine, wine, wine. Those were hurtful words. Wine, wine, wine. So, Jesus has already proven he was God. He was anointed as the Son of Man. He's anointed as the Son of David. And who just pronounced him the Christus?
The high priest.
The high priest just pronounced Jesus Christ the Christus. Period. Done. This is beautiful stuff. You can't make this up. I mean, this is just too beautiful, And it fits so wonderfully within the context of exactly what Mark, I know, is trying to do. Then it says in 65. Now this is interesting. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists. Exactly. Well, see, the word is kalaphazo. Why did they blindfold him?
So he couldn't testify against him.
Exactly. Matter of fact, these guys just got themselves in big trouble from a Jewish standpoint, right? Now, you can see where they think they're coming from. They blindfolded him because it says here, prophesy, and the subordinates took and beat him, etc., etc. The thing is that I don't think they were asking him to prophesy who hit him, per se. I think that they were doing this because they did not want the witness, because if he was God, right? I mean, they got a serious problem here. If he's a Christus, they got a serious problem. I think this is more an indication of their belief. And notice, they struck him with the hand. It says they struck him with a fist, which is exactly right. That is punishable by death.
Well,
That's
go back
striking.
to the question that he said, well, you know, why didn't they just take them out and stone them?
Because under Roman law, they cannot put a free man to death.
What about Stephen? They stoned Stephen.
This
He
is
was a
why
slave.
Stephen may have been a slave, and he actually went to the synagogue of free men. But we know, okay, the synagogue of freed men was probably a synagogue of freed men and those who would like to be freed men, right? The reason they were segregated was because they had been and they probably were slaves. So Stephen was stoned because he was not a free man, I think. I think he was a slave.
So was the adulteress that they were going to stone also a slave?
She's a woman, and she may have been a slave. She may have been a prostitute and a slave. The Romans, look, law in the ancient world, if you haven't guessed, is mostly for free people and for men, right? The Romans were pretty good, though. The Romans, that's why in my book, Abinadar feels so strongly about Ruth in the book, because even though she's a prostitute and she's, she's not a slave, but she's a prostitute, a woman, is because the Romans really did have their laws covered women. And even Jewish law, by the way, covered women. A lot. But you notice they're not following their own law, right?
Yeah.
So you expect them to follow God's law either? I'm just saying. But yeah, the Romans, if the Romans had known about it, they probably would have gone, that's distasteful, but okay. They probably wouldn't have prosecuted. There's no police, right? And unless you have somebody to defend you, you're toast, right? So, this is the way the world is. Today we live in a more enlightened period, although no one can still protect your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right?
But I thought Paul's whole issue was that he was a Roman citizen, and that's why he deserved and was entitled to his time in court. The people of Jerusalem, the majority of them, far and away, were not Roman citizens, correct or incorrect?
But if you were, let's say, if you were a Roman citizen, you could be given a trial.
Right.
If you were not a Roman citizen and it wasn't for death, because the Romans said only for death sentence, you can prosecute your own crimes, right? But only the death sentence will be given by us.
But you can appeal it if you're a citizen.
If you're a citizen, you could appeal the justice. So, for example, in Paul's case, he was captured by Greeks, right, in almost every case. And so the Greeks wanted to prosecute him in Macedonia and other places. And so they could have kept him in prison. They could have, just held him. What the Jews did, like for being a theft. For theft, in the Jewish theft, you were supposed to pay back 5 times. 4 times, depends on whether you read Leviticus or Deuteronomy. But what the Jews would do is they would say, you can't pay back 4 times. We're not able to take your himein. We can't take your underclothing or your clothing, but we can take your coat by law. If your coat wasn't worth the amount you stole, then guess what they did?
Debtor's prison.
They sold you. No debtor's prison. They sold you. Debtor's prison was a step up.
That's where you go out of debtor's prison. You get sold out of debtor's.
They sold your body. They sold your body, and they sold your family. I mean, in the ancient world, you could sell your family, your children, your wife, right, to get out of debt, and that's what they would do. And one of the key ways was if you were, theft. So they didn't keep people in prison; they would make you a slave. That's the way it worked. The people that were imprisoned in the ancient world were what?
Political prisoners.
Yeah, political prisoners, religious prisoners. They had nothing to do with crimes. It had everything to do with, you blasphemed or it's kind of like ISIS today, right? Except they kill people when they, yeah.
Would they sell you to the person you owed the debt to,
Highest bidder.
or give you, or?
Most likely they didn't want to do that. And if you were a guy, usually what they do is they sell you hear the galley slave things. Usually they didn't want just anybody in galley slaves, but they'd sell you to the mines. The mining operations were always full of death, destruction, and badness. And one of the best ways to get one of the best ways, even into the 20th century, to get gold and other precious metals out of ore. You know what's used, right? Mercury. Use mercury, and basically you use the organic substrate like vegetable matter or fruit to suck the mercury back out of the gold, and it will leave a lump of gold or silver if it's dissolved in the mercury. But then you want to get back the mercury. And how do you get back the mercury? You burn it. You burn it. But the problem with burning mercury or burning it, what happens then? You get mercury fumes. And so the people that were doing the mining were working with mercury and mercury fumes, and it was pretty horrific because they would die usually with mercury poisoning. Mercury is not really a poison unless it has it has to have bioreceptors, so it usually has to be in a carbon compound. So guess what? When I mixed the mercury with a fruit, what did I get when I cooked it?
Carbon.
I get organic mercury compounds, which are that's the bad stuff. Don't eat elemental mercury. It's not good for you.
They had lead in their water.
But it might pass through you, right? It can clog you up, so don't do that. But usually you don't die from elemental mercury. You don't get poison from it. You get poison from the mercury that's annealed with carbon. So anyway, they'll sell you the mine. The mine is the place to go. Let's see. It says that they passed him not to the guards. It says, and the hupateres, the subordinates. So guess who's among the subordinates? Peter. So the subordinates who are not guards, these are priests and probably other rabbis and students of the rabbis. It says literally they lambano, they took, and rapazia, they slapped him. I'll make one point before we go. Why do you think they slapped him where the other guys struck him with their fists?
A little more religious here.
Because if they struck him with the fist, then they were guilty of striking. And, there's a lot more people there than just, right? Everybody's watching. But would you want to be the hupateros? Would you want to be the guy that if this guy really was let off or whatever, that he brings it to court for striking? No. Slap. I mean, just the words used are very important.
What verse is that?
That's verse 65.
Okay, I thought you said in verse 65 was when they were striking him with a fist.
Yeah, it says, right away it says, some began to spit at him. That's of the Sanhedrin and the other group in the house. And they blindfolded him and struck at him with their fist. Literally, kalaphizo, they rapped with the fist. And they said, prophesy. And then it says, and the hupateres, the subordinates, Lambero, took him, and rapizia, they slapped him. They didn't beat him, they slapped him. So I'm just saying, it's really interesting. The leaders are not afraid to strike him, but the others only slapped. And they probably was a backhand slap so they wouldn't get prosecuted under their own law. Thank you, Father, for your word. We pray you look out this week. In your name we pray. Amen.
It's interesting that the English words in my translation